Hello world and welcome to my channel. My name is Jeff and I am that French horror guy. For my first project, I put together a Slasher Movies Iceberg, where I will dive into one film at a time, giving a brief overview of each one. I decided to focus on movies released between 1978 and 1988, which is considered the golden age of slasher films, starting with John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978 and arbitrarily ending in 1988, just so we can cover the entire decade. This iceberg is not a ranking from best to worst. Instead, it's organized by the popularity and renown of the movies. We'll start at the top with the most well-known titles and work our way down to the more obscure ones. There are 10 tiers in total, each featuring around 22 films, adding up to 225 movies overall. When it comes to defining the slasher genre, I opted for a broad interpretation to include a wider range of film. So expect to see thrillers, gialli, supernatural horror, psychological flicks, and more on the list. One other crucial decision I had to make, which might raise some eyebrows, is leaving out the sequels from the three major franchises Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I simply want to keep the list manageable and avoid repeating myself too much. I plan to keep each film segment between 5 to 7 minutes long, covering 5 movies per video. This way, I can maintain a reasonable length for each part and upload the videos on a steady and tight schedule. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing and all that stuff if you like my work. This will help grow the channel. Again, thank you for being here. You're much welcome. Make yourself comfortable. And with that being said, let's dive into my Slasher Movies Iceberg. The first film on the list won't be a surprise to anyone, as it is none other than Halloween, directed by John Carpenter and released in 1978. I won't go into great detail about this film. There's nothing I could say that hasn't been said a million times already. Producers Erwin Yablans and Mustafa Akkad gave Carpenter complete creative control to write, direct, and compose the score for the film, in exchange for a reduced salary. Co-written with his then-girlfriend and co-producer Deborah Hill in under 10 days, Halloween was then filmed within a tight schedule of 4 weeks and produced on a remarkably modest budget of approximately $320,000. The storyline is simple. On Halloween night in 1963, 6-year-old Michael Myers kills his older sister before being locked in a psychiatric hospital. 15 years later, on the same Halloween night, he escapes and returns to his hometown to stalk and murder young babysitters, including Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in her first role, while his psychiatrist Dr. Loomis, portrayed by the legendary Donald Pleasence, tries to stop him. Upon its release, the film was a tremendous success, earning over $70 million, making it the most profitable independent film ever and setting a standard for the new genre, which will eventually be known as slasher. While it didn't invent all the slasher film rules, acknowledging earlier influences like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960 and Bob Clark's Black Christmas from 1974, as well as the Italian giallo film of the 70s, Halloween is still the most influential, defining key elements of the genre. The targeting of substance abusers and sexually active characters, a holiday setting, point-of-view shots of the killer who's associated to a memorable musical theme, and the archetype of the final girl. In the wake of this success, a wave of slasher films would flood theaters in the ensuing years, for better or worse, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are about to explore in this iceberg. The second iconic slasher film featured on our list is, unsurprisingly as well, Friday the 13th, which premiered in 1980. Producer and director John Cunnigham took a daring step by placing a full-page ad in Variety to promote the film solely based on its title, even before a script was written. This strategy, however, proved effective in securing the necessary funding, and only then the screenplay was written by Victor Miller. With a relatively low budget of approximately $550,000, filming then took place in New Jersey during the summer of 1979.
The boy, is he dead too?
The film opens in 1958 at a youth camp named Crystal Lake, where a young boy named Jason drowned due to neglect by his counselors, too busy frolicking around, two of whom being subsequently brutally murdered by an unseen killer. 20 years later, a group of teenagers decide to reopen the camp and becomes themselves the new targets of stalking and murders on a Friday the 13th night. The movie openly draws its narrative from two significant sources: Halloween, of course, and Mario Bava's A Bay of Blood, released in 1971, the latter providing notably inspiration for its lakeside setting and the methods employed for the killings. One strength of Friday the 13th lies in the fact that the killer is scarcely seen on the screen, creating a strong sense of suspense and tension. As for the characters, although not deeply developed, they serve as vessels for the audience, contributing to the movie's success and appeal within its genre. Another important part of the movie's impact is its use of gore and nudity, which became essential for slasher films. The great Tom Savini created the special effects, having been hired based on his exceptional work on George Romero's classic Dawn of the Dead, released in 1978. Additionally, the brilliant score written by Harry Manfredini, while influenced by Bernard Herrmann's music for Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, strongly contributes to the identity of the movie. Friday the 13th is a solid exploitation B-movie that knows exactly what it is and how to resonate with its audience. Despite mostly negative reviews, it was hugely successful, grossing almost $60 million at its release in 1980. Building upon those introduced in Halloween, Friday the 13th firmly established most of the defining characteristics and conventions of the slasher genre, therefore becoming perhaps the most quintessential slasher of the 80s and certainly a flagship of the genre. Friday the 13th, just like Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street, will eventually spawn a plethora of sequels in the decades after its release, with varying degrees of quality and success, and eventually give birth to another iconic horror villain, Jason Voorhees. Sitting on the third step of the top 3 podium of our iceberg is A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven and released in 1984. The film's placement in relation to its 2 predecessors is interesting, as it brings a significant change to the slasher genre by adding a supernatural element that was absent in Halloween and Friday the 13th. Some purists even firmly believe that a true slasher should not include supernatural elements, arguing that the essence of the genre lies in the fact that the killer is a human being. However, in A Nightmare on Elm Street, the killer invades the dreams of his victims, therefore introducing a supernatural twist that would then become common in the genre. The story follows the teenagers of Elm Street who are plagued by a strange wave of nightmares, where they are being chased by a killer with a grotesquely burnt face and a glove equipped with razor-sharp blades, named Fred Krueger, later known as Freddy. The most terrifying part, however, is that he can actually kill his victims when attacking them in their dreams. Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, along with her friends, including her boyfriend Glenn, portrayed by Johnny Depp in his very first role, will then have to confront this monster in both their dreams and real life. Wes Craven, who previously directed The Last House on the Left in 1972 and The Hills Have Eyes in 1977, wrote the screenplay for A Nightmare on Elm Street in 1981. After over 3 years of struggling to get funding from major studios, Robert Shai, the head of New Line Cinema, finally saw the film's potential. At the time, his company was mainly a small distribution firm, but aimed to produce films, having started with Jack Shoulder's Alone in the Dark in 1982. A Nightmare on Elm Street needs no introduction, as it has secured a lasting place in cinematic history, introducing one of the most terrifying figures in horror, the incomparable Freddy Krueger, brilliantly portrayed by actor Robert Englund. The film premiered in a landscape saturated with imitations of Halloween and Friday the 13th, yet it quickly distinguished itself due to its innovative storyline, thematic depth, and overall filmmaking excellence, establishing itself as a definitive masterpiece within the horror genre. As I previously mentioned, although it was not the very first to incorporate them, A Nightmare on Elm Street remains the most influential movie that features supernatural elements upfront within the genre, which had predominantly featured human killers up to that point. The chilling notion that Freddy Krueger can actually physically reach his victims through their dreams is not only a strikingly creative idea, but also a profoundly unsettling one, as it places him in a position to invade their most vulnerable state while they are asleep. In this initial film, Freddy Krueger is still a dark and disturbing figure. His grotesque, burnt face, created by special makeup effect artist David Miller, is repulsive, and his behavior reflects that of a reckless and grim killer. A groundbreaking aspect of the character is the introduction of a truly unique weapon that will become his signature, the now iconic glove fitted with knife blades instead of fingers, designed by mechanical effect artist Jim Doyle. This weapon embodies the essence of nightmares, tapping into our primal fears, especially the fear of animals and their sharp teeth and claws. Wes Craven's background as a philosophy teacher adds depth to the story, allowing him to explore themes that connect with our basic instincts and subconscious fears. The dream world is a place without limits, where social norms disappear, and especially in nightmares, it becomes a setting where people feel exposed and helpless, just like a newborn facing frightening monsters. And the film masterfully plays with this notion as it blurs the lines between reality and dreams, creating a tension that keeps viewers perpetually on edge. Moreover, our subconscious holds complicated feelings about sexuality, especially during teenage years, and A Nightmare on Elm Street does not shy away from this theme, presenting Freddy Krueger as a potential metaphorical rapist, with the bathtub scene serving as a particularly chilling representation of this idea. The movie also introduced another slight shift in the genre with the inclusion of parental figures. Unlike Halloween and Friday the 13th, where parents were absent, they play a crucial role in A Nightmare on Elm Street. The parents of the teenagers of Elm Street are actually the ones responsible for Freddy Krueger's revenge, yet they choose to lie and conceal the truth from their kids instead of protecting and supporting them. Even Nancy's dad, played by the great John Saxon, fails to help his daughter, despite being a law enforcement officer. The original Nightmare on Elm Street remains a genuinely terrifying film, expertly directed, featuring a dark and often brutal narrative for its characters. It cleverly conceals deeper themes within its spooky atmosphere and introduces an unforgettable new villain, the now iconic Freddy Krueger. Released in November 1984, A Nightmare on Elm Street was a big success, which inevitably led to a series of sequels in the years that followed. Therefore, joining Halloween and Friday the 13th ultimately brought us the trio of mega franchises that would define the genre during the 80s and beyond. At the fourth place of our iceberg, we have Child's Play, directed by Tom Holland and released in 1988. Child's Play is originally the creation of Don Mancini, who wrote the very first draft in 1986 while still studying at Columbia University. Initially, legendary producer Charles Band showed interest, but United Artists ended up launching the project in 1987. After Tom Holland was chosen to direct, he worked with Mancini and John Lafia to revise the script, leading to many versions before filming could begin. The movie starts with a chase scene where Detective Mike Norris, played by Chris Sarandon, is chasing the infamous serial killer Charles Lee Ray, played by Brad Dourif. Their chase takes them to a toy store where Ray is shot several times. But before he dies, he manages to use a voodoo spell to transfer his soul into a child-sized good guy doll named, you guessed it, Chucky. This very same doll is later purchased by Karen Barclay, played by Catherine Hicks, for her 6-year-old son Andy, played by a then also 6-year-old Alex Vincent. Soon, the evil spirit of Charles Lee Ray takes over the doll, and Chucky, still voiced by Brad Dourif, begins his killing spree. The film's crew met a significant challenge, bringing an 18-inch doll to life in a way that was both functional and convincingly eerie. This required great skill both in front of and behind the camera. Thankfully, Tom Holland was up to the task. After all, the man had previously written the screenplay of the unexpectedly good Psycho 2, directed by Richard Franklin and released in 1983, and wrote and directed one of the most beloved horror comedies of the 80s, Fright Night, released in 1985 and already featuring Chris Sarandon. Production began in early 1988 with a budget of about $10 million. Chucky was brought to life by a team led by Howard Berger, who would later become the B part of the famous K&B Effects team, and featuring Kevin Yeager, most known for handling the Freddy Krueger special makeup in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The character was then operated by a group of up to 9 puppeteers, headed by master puppeteer Brock Winkless. The Chucky puppet was a technical wonder, equipped with radio-controlled animatronics capable of executing nearly all its movements and facial expressions. For the wider shots though, it was actor Ed Gale that had to wear a life-size Chucky costume. Despite all the challenges posed by the intricate and sometimes unpredictable mechanics, Tom Holland, along with his dedicated crew and cast, successfully met the challenge, perfectly capturing Chucky on screen and creating in the process a brand new horror icon. Another key feature of the movie was the outstanding performance of Brad Dourif, who gave Chucky his distinctive voice.
I am Chucky, the killer doll, and I dig it!
The idea of an evil doll wasn't new when Child's Play was released, and Don Mancini acknowledged several influences, such as the Amelia segment from Dan Curtis' Trilogy of Terror, released in 1975, and the classic 1963 Season 5 Twilight Zone episode, Living Doll. Additionally, Stuart Gordon's greatly overlooked film Dolls came out just a year before. However, the success and fanbase of Child's Play helped it stand out, creating a new subgenre centered around the terrifying notion of possessed killer dolls. Upon its release, Child's Play emerged as an unexpected box office hit, raking in over $44 million. This first film is darker than one might expect, and just like A Nightmare on Elm Street, the comedic element would eventually appear more prominently in the sequels. It is expertly crafted, featuring a good pace and strong acting, and introducing audiences to an instantly memorable new villain, the now legendary Chucky. On a personal note, if I may add, while these films hold a special place as the starting point of the franchise, my own personal favorite will always remain the brilliantly twisted and absolutely hilarious Seed of Chucky. But that, my dear friends, is a tale for another time and another place, eventually. Up next on our list is Sleepaway Camp, which hit theaters in 1983. This film is the brainchild of Robert Hiltzik, who not only directed but also wrote the screenplay. This project will mark his sole contribution to the film industry until he returned with Return to Sleepaway Camp in 2008. Sleepaway Camp is primarily famous for its shocking twist ending, which I won't spoil here, but if you've seen it, you definitely know what I'm talking about. The story begins with a tragic boat accident that claims the lives of a father and one of his two kids. The surviving child, Angela, played by Felicia Rose, is taken in by her aunt Martha, played by Desiree Good, who has a son named Ricky, played by Jonathan Tiersten. Fast forward a few years, and both kids are off to summer camp, where a strange series of murders begins to unfold. At first glance, Sleepaway Camp appears to follow a closely similar path to Friday the 13th. However, it soon diverges into its own unique narrative, focusing on Angela, an exceedingly shy and withdrawn girl who becomes the target of bullying by her peers. The plot then centers around a mysterious killer who seems to seek vengeance against those who have wronged her. One of the film's notable strengths is its willingness to present a variety of inventive killings, allowing special effects B-movie wizard Ed French to display his expertise. The murders are especially imaginative and stand out from your typical slasher fare, from the pervert cook being doused with boiling water to a death by curling iron, which is precisely as it sounds, and a fatal encounter with a beehive. Overall, the film maintains a pleasant atmosphere and a well-paced narrative, and the character interactions are often hilarious. Felicia Rose delivers an outstanding performance as the wide-eyed and nearly mute Angela. Additionally, the scenes with Aunt Martha feature a unique and eerie dreamlike atmosphere, and Desiree Good is absolutely brilliant in the role. One key difference that sets Sleepaway Camp apart from other slasher films is its underlying themes. The film can be seen as a critique of bullying among kids and a denunciation of the disturbing behavior of some adults at the camp, one character being upfront introduced as a child predator. This makes the movie a unique piece that challenges our usual expectations. Upon its release in 1983, Sleepaway Camp was predictably met with negative reviews from critics. However, over time, it has garnered a substantial cult following and is now considered one of the finest slasher films of its time. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching my video. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. This will help grow the channel. My name is Jeff, I am that French horror guy, and I will see you hopefully in the next part of my Slasher Movies Iceberg. Until then, goodbye.